Hello, good night, everyone. Welcome. Aloha, I Need Our Living Conversations 142, 2 sessions away from the 144 magical number. I'm with Sacred Blue Heron Woman who is in Indianola, Oklahoma. I'm Julian Katari, and I'm going to introduce this today's conversation, today's topic, which is the joy of polyamory. What is polyamory? Well, it means loving more than one, loving many, and and I had a few things I wanted to add or to thoughts. A lot of things that came to me, and I don't know what's the best time to share them. If right now,
Yeah, go ahead.
or maybe it'll be better once you start the the conversation or the investigation, the Owl Dojo investigation. I don't know, but let me give some context. So, um, last session we described the monogamy and how that reflects. It's reflected in so many other things, not just in our love and sexual relationships, but um, how this template you were talking about, like a chip, a template that we all live by, that we all uh, subconsciously have, right? We all have that kind of embedded in our subconsciousness, and it's very limiting. It's um, when we're trying to seek to create a new humanity, when we are trying to seek to solve the problems, all the problems that we have, we understand that we need to make a lot of changes, that we need to leave the system, that we need to create the new by leaving the old. And then sometimes, but then the thing is that we sometimes take this template of the old with us, and when we try to do that, and when we don't touch these things, like our relationships and how we are reproducing the same template of the old into the new, if we don't cover this, if we don't touch this specific point, then we're going to be limited in how much of a new thing we can create.
Exactly.
So that's why this is so important to share with everyone. And here we are. This is really new, and yet 142 sessions, and yet we're still right where we need to be. We're like, it's like you, always feels like we're beginning something, even if we've been doing it for long now.
Yeah. Well, we are always beginning something new because something new is always coming up.
Hmm.
So, right. So, the prelude to a lifelong monogamy echoes through our culture in fairy tales that we all know. A beautiful, charming young woman toils alone in an unhappy life, friendless and beset with suffering on all sides. She endures hardships and trauma until one day along comes her handsome prince, who swoops in and carries her across the threshold as they fall in love, live happily ever after, and the curtains close. Stories like this hook us because they offer a comforting view of relationships. True love conquers all. Everyone has just one soulmate waiting to be found, and once we've found him or her, we will live happily ever after.
Hmm.
So, it's actually really time to forget the happily ever after since it's a myth. We're not static. We live, we grow, we change.
Hmm.
The fairy tale myth is based on static, right? Being stasis, being in one spot.
Hmm.
Happy, healthy relationships require investment, self awareness, and situational awareness for the changes in ourselves and in our partners and in our situation. So, polyamory can actually feel really threatening because it upsets the fairy tale assumption that the right partner will keep us safe from change.
Mm. Wow, this is very powerful. It's to me, it's like spot on to what I need to be
Yeah.
listening to and what I'm working on. Like right now, that's where I am.
It can feel threatening because it introduces the prospect of chaos and uncertainty into what's supposed to be a straightforward progression into bliss. So, a healthy relationship, first of all, must be resilient, able to respond to the changes and complexity that life brings. And also, happiness is a choice, a desire, a process. However, the fairy tale tells us that with the right partner, happiness just happens. Happiness is actually something we choose every day, and it comes from our outlook on life, not from the things around us. So the relationship fairy tale carries many other hidden falsehoods. For instance, it promises that just one person will always be able to meet our needs and will always be able to meet that one person's needs.
Mm-hmm.
And think about this, like with the eco villages and stuff. That's still the case, right? People moving off grid to my own farm is still my husband and I can do it all by ourselves. No, we can't. We can't. We can't. There's no way you can provide everything you need with only two people. No way.
Mm-hmm.
Even with kids. No way.
Mm-hmm.
So if we accept the fairy tale in a relationship, we feel shaken and insecure whenever reality doesn't live up to our expectations. The idea of the one love of your life is really seductive. But the truth is that it is absolutely possible to have more than one love of our life.
Mm-hmm.
So in polyamory or polygamy, we know that we can all have several loves of our lives, and maybe we might not be sexually or romantically involved with all of them. And some of our loves will have other loves as well. And we still feel secure because we are in a big family who will always be there for us. Another piece of the fairy tale myth is that establishing a romantic relationship happily ever after switches off the drive to bond with others. It doesn't. It tells us that the task is done, the race is won, and there's no need to find new partners. The reality is the drive to bond with many doesn't just switch off, we just simply suppress it. We humans are social animals, and we do much better when we share our lives intimately with many others. So remaining open to the idea of new connections and more love and enriching the lives of everyone involved is part of polyamory. And loving more than one person at the same time is not an escape from intimacy. It's actually a very enthusiastic embrace of intimacy. So polyamory literally means many loves. And polyamorous relationships can be joyous, brimming with laughter and love. However, just like monogamous relationships, they take work and they require trust, communication, and kindness. A polyamorous relationship does not mean that anything goes, right? It means far more listening, far more discussing, and far more self-analyzing. It's really tempting to think that a relationship with multiple partners has no rules. And this is just not true because it's more important than ever to have agreements between each partner, and all
Mm-hmm.
require trust, respect, and compassionate behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So navigating polyamorous relationships actually requires outstanding communication skills and good problem solving tools. And at the end of the day, the best measure of a relationship isn't how complicated it is. It's about how much joy, love, delight, pleasure, and support and love it brings to each person involved. Polyamorous relationships offer many opportunities for growth. It takes guts to be polyamorous because it increases the odds of feeling hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine yourself as a tree. Your roots go deep into the dirt, nourishing and supporting you. They're fed by the rain, which keeps your sap flowing. Your leaves are bathed in sunlight. The wind brings pollen from other trees so you can produce fruit. And maybe there's a squirrel or two that runs around your branches and a bird nesting, raising its brood gone by fall. So each one of these things, the dirt, the rain, the wind, the sun, the squirrel, the birds, the leaves, they all do something different for the tree. None are interchangeable.
Mhm.
But lacking one, you might wither and die, or at least fail to flourish. With too much of one, you might suffocate. So this is really a metaphor for polyamorous relationships. Some people we might call the anchor or taproot, and these might be a specific partner. And then maybe parents or siblings around us help ground us and stabilize us. They'd be like the dirt. Others may be variable like the wind, yet they're no less crucial. And others are like the energizing, joy bringing sunlight or the cool cleansing rain. Growing up in a monogamous society, we're shown only a handful of paths that love, particularly romantic love, can take.
Mhm.
Relationships are expected to follow a specific trajectory, like a relationship escalator. Date for so many weeks or months, and then the ring better come, and then the wedding, and then the babies.
Yeah, the protocols.
Right. And if a
There's
relationship,
nothing more uh, br- passion breaking than protocols.
exactly, exactly, right? So if a relationship doesn't follow that path, we're told by everyone around us that it's not real. And
Mhm.
that's a lie. So this cookie cutter way or template way of looking at relationships is so ingrained in us that we must stock it in ourselves and not bring it into polyamory because
Mhm.
we know we will.
Okay. Watch out for that.
Yeah, because it's so ingrained in us for so long. So if we choose polyamory, we must let go of monogamy's predefined structures so that we can have the freedom to negotiate relationships that work for all. So, for example, there's no need to break up a relationship if something or someone changes. Maybe we can keep the connection and let it reshape.
Hmm.
Building relationships that are free to develop however they naturally want to flow.
Hmm.
So it helps to cognize and then recognize that love is malleable and ever changing. So first we cognize it, we bring it in, and then we recognize it, bring it in again. So it becomes, right? Um, Love's intensity in nature varies, and so this influences its flow, its mutable form. And so embracing the idea that relationships are individual affairs tailored to meet the specific needs of all the people involved helps us navigate polyamory. Monogamy tells us that successful, real relationships all look the same. It tells us what to expect. The societal blueprint is one man, one woman, 2.4 kids, a house with a white picket fence, and the yard.
Hmm.
PTA meetings and apple pie. Polyamory, polygamy doesn't do this because there's no template. There's only nuance and shades of gray, and we do not like shades of gray, do we? It has to be black and white. So with polyamory and polygamy, there's no clear path to follow. And I know when I'm using the both interchangeably because I want to take the sting out of polygamy because we associate polygamy with Mormons and Mormon men who are allowed to have more than one wife. And there's actually a TV show on Hulu about escaping polygamy, right? So we've got to. That word comes loaded.
Hmm. Yeah.
There's no clear path to follow, just the opportunity to experiment and experience far more pleasure, have fun, learn, and grow. Relationships don't fit a blueprint. They are as individual as the people in them. We grow them to meet our needs. It's like growing a garden. As the things in our gardens have lives of their own, things they can and cannot become, things they need, and things that don't affect them at all, so relationships will seek their own true expression. A core value of a polyamorous life is flexibility.
Okay.
Flexi- it's actually very natural for us. It's
Yeah.
very innate. However, due to all the sexual suppression, we have a lot of armoring in our body that gets in the way of being flexible.
Hmm.
Flexibility promotes resilience, and being flexible means you're willing to face discomfort. And there's a whole lot more to life than avoiding discomfort. And so many of us spend our whole life trying to avoid discomfort.
Yeah.
So we stay shrunk in this little bitty space.
Hmm.
And actually, refusing to face discomfort can really lead to unethical behavior.
And to unhealthy life.
Yes.
Hmm.
So having a brilliant life means living far outside your comfort zone, coloring outside the lines. Another core value for polyamory is being community minded. This means prioritizing the impact of a decision on the entire group
Hmm.
rather than on the needs of individuals within the group.
Hmm.
And that's how tribes worked, how
Yeah.
tribal life worked, right? It also means that relationship networks can be very loosely structured without a definite hierarchy. And we're all about the hierarchy. That's another one that's been ingrained into us. Hierarchy, hierarchy, hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
The template of monogamy tells us that a romantic partner and a sexual partner are the same. In this template, emotional intimacy and physical intimacy are so tightly entwined that we're now talking about emotional infidelity and being told by therapists far and right not to permit each other to become too close to their friends
Mm-hmm.
or even have friends outside the marriage. So the template of monogamy leaves little to no room for close friendship, much less non-sexual romances. And I mean, I can attest to that. Absolutely. It's incredibly difficult for a man that's come out of a divorce to even be friends with a woman.
Mm. Yeah.
So this template causes problems when a couple are no longer sexually attracted to one another or have mismatched libidos.
Mm.
An advantage of a polyamorous life is that you're not hitching all your sexual wagons to one single star. It allows room for change.
Mm-hmm.
An emotionally satisfying, deeply committed, loving, open relationship between two people can flourish without those people being sexually thwarted for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
This lifestyle allows for the possibility that we can remain in relationships that matter to us and have sex, lots of love play when we want to, because we want to, and not because we're afraid of losing someone that we care for.
Mm.
A polyamorous life offers opportunities for different relationships to provide for different needs.
Mm-hmm.
The danger lies in seeing people as our need fulfillment machines. So when we begin to look at people in terms of what needs they can meet rather than as whole people in their own right, we start down the road toward treating people as things. Remaining open to relationships in a wide variety of configurations, developing tools for open communication, and advocating for our needs. Acting ethically and compassionately is always what works for relationships. And you and I, all of us, are each personally responsible for becoming more ethical than the society we grew up in. Being ethical means that you're willing to look at your actions and their effects on other people. And in making decisions, you will then consider the well being of everyone involved, not just yourself. And that's so actually the truth is we have a very non ethical, it's not hard to be more ethical than the society we live in today. Actually, it really isn't.
Mm.
because everyone's non-ethical. They don't give a shit what what their decision does to other people. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So observing ourselves and others as we try new relationship patterns, seeing what choices tend to lead to pain and conflict and which tend to lead to harmony is the way to be. And then eventually, gradually, these patterns become evidence of what actions are likely to promote the well-being of everyone in a relationship network. And we forge a path that others can follow. So happy, strong relationships of any kind have certain things in common. Think of them as compass directions. Number one is trust. Trusting ourselves first, and then trusting those that we are in relationship with. When new people come into our lives, they bring new challenges and new delight. When relationships grow, they change, and we might be tempted to maintain as much of the status quo as possible by limiting what the other can do. However, building walls around each other is more damaging than trusting in that new partner's desire to do what's right and live from their innate goodness. And trusting ourselves to be able to adapt, to continue to find our happiness and still feel cherished even when things change is all about trusting in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Courage. This is personal, ordinary courage, not the courage of firefighters of running into a burning building. This ordinary courage involves talking about our feelings when we're afraid, challenging ourselves to step outside our comfort zones without a safety net to catch us. That's the Fool card in the tarot, right? Sleeping without a safety net. The courage it takes to say, yes, I'm going to open my heart to this person, even though I don't know what the outcome will be. This is everyday courage. The courage to begin a relationship with someone who's already partnered, trusting that person to carve out the space for you. This kind of courage comes from a willingness to be vulnerable and to accept that you'll be okay, even though you don't know what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Courage is not a destination. It's not something we have. It's not something we do. And it happens in increments. And we learn courage by couraging. Abundance. We share the world with more than 7 billion other people. 7 billion potential relationships. The abundance model says relationship opportunities are all around us. And when we hold this model of abundance, it's easier to just go do the things that bring us joy without worrying about searching for a partner. And that tends to make us more attractive because happy, confident people are desirable. Number 4, ethics, which starts with treating people with compassion, integrity, and respect. Again, ethical relationships are not something we do. We don't have them. Being an ethical person means looking at the consequences of our choices on others and ourselves, first of all. Number 5, empowerment. Respect for the autonomy of others. Relationships work best when all the people involved feel empowered to help shape and guide their relationships, to advocate for their needs, and to feel they have a hand in the outcome. Many of us have been taught that if we are empowered to make our choices on ourselves, we will become monsters. So we must surrender our decision-making power to external authority, which somehow magically is proof of us not becoming monsters. This idea has permeated society and informs us how to build our relationships. So, anytime you're out and about, since I don't have anyone sitting beside me, ask yourself if you're willing to respect their ability to choose, rather than making a law that we think will benefit people by taking away their choices, like seatbelt laws.
Mm-hmm.
Empowering people to make their own choices is actually the best way to have our own needs met. Number 6, communication. Oh, this is a big one. All words have not a single meaning, but a swarm of them like bees around the hive.
Okay.
And the meanings are to each person, right? Different for each person. So if we use a word, anyway, we'll get into that more. Good communication is a process and it's essential to building trust, demonstrating respect and understanding the needs of the people we're close to. Good communication is speaking the truth about ourselves, our needs, our boundaries with honesty, precision, and listening with grace. When our partners speak of themselves, their needs, and their boundaries. This kind of communication isn't really about words. It's about vulnerability, self knowledge, self integrity, self empathy, and self compassion. Our communication so often relies on words that have shared meanings, but the shared meanings aren't necessarily the same for everybody. And then there's the way we use the words that mean something to us, but it means something different to the other.
Hmm.
And some of our words come preloaded with expectations and emotional baggage, which makes them prone to misuse. So then these words can become tools of manipulation because they really sound reasonable on the surface, but they have meanings that are difficult in depth. So, for example, respect. What exactly does it mean to respect a relationship? Does it mean to yield to the people in that relationship all the time? Does it mean to do always what they say? Respect is reciprocal. So, what respect are the people in a relationship prepared to offer a new relationship? So, rather than use vague words like respect,
Hmm.
all will benefit from spelling out what their expectations are. And we do like to hide behind vague words, right? Because respect sounds amazing, but it, it is. When you think about it, it's pretty darn vague.
Yeah.
Using vague words like respect creates an easy way to accuse others of breaking agreements anytime they do something you don't like without actually having to make explicit agreements.
Hmm.
Come first. There's another agreeable yet vague sounding, agreeable sounding yet very vague phrase. The most common we hear is, my existing obligations come first. So it's better to spell out the commitments you have and what needs to be done to discharge them so they're not always coming first. Fair and equal. these these words can conjure up images of relationships where everyone is doled out the same size of slice of pumpkin pie, even if some are hungrier than others, and some might be allergic or some might not like pumpkin pie.
Hmm.
So equality of opportunity is very different than equality of circumstance.
Wow.
What's most fair is not necessarily an even division of resources, but rather a distribution that meets as many of the needs of all the people as possible.
Hmm.
Right. Hoo hoo. Yes, there's another one that's loaded with vagary.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, it needs to be used very cautiously. Some things we do not have a right to expect in any relationship is to never be challenged, to always be comfortable, and to always have other people navigate around our triggers and discomfort. Things we do not have a right to do are to treat people as expendable, to extract promises that someone will never leave you, and to try to control other people's relationships.
Hmm.
Success, another vague word. When we think of successful relationships, what comes to mind? Or when we think of
Example.
success, are we thinking of only a particular relationship or all of them? Right?
Hmm.
We never. Reasonable, another word that gets tossed around very easily. And again, it's talking about the specifics of how something makes us feel and talk about what we need and desire to negotiate a solution that works for everyone. Failures to communicate happen when we lead with our fears instead of our desires. Life is much better when we lead with our desires instead of our fears. Living in polyamory challenges communication to a degree that other relationship models don't. In monogamous couples, for instance, if you're trying to process with a person, we usually pretend we're not. When we know what we desire, like many loves, communicating what we're feeling is the only way to build multiple sustainable relationships. So some tools for this polyamorous toolbox is active listening, listening intently to what the other person is saying rather than using that time to think about the next thing you want to say.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, that happens.
Yep, I've done that many times. Direct communication. This means saying plainly what you think and asking plainly for what you need or desire. So it requires actually identifying desire, identifying the need, and then clearly asking for it, not just dropping hints or talking about the need and desire.
Hmm.
Nonviolent communication is another tool. This involves the speaker putting aside assumptions about the other's motivations and examines the speaker's own emotional responses. The process of this is based on the assumption that anything that people hear from us that sounds like an analysis or criticism or implies wrongness on their part prevents us from connecting with them in a way that allows everyone to contribute to everyone else's well-being or to another's well-being.
Hmm.
So part of the nonviolent communication process is to say clearly what is alive in us, what is the desire, what do we desire. Another part is to say clearly what would make life more wonderful for us, and then to present this information to others as requests and not as demands.
Hmm.
So the biggest part of communication is asking for what we desire, what we need. And it's hard to learn to make requests in ways that are requests, not demands. So the simple act of formulating the request and deciding whom to ask and how forces us to get clear on exactly what we need and desire. And the truth is that consistently asking for what we need and desire gives makes people trust that we will ask. And when we ask for what we need and desire, we give a gift to the people we love. So there's four parts to clear communication, and that is observation of both
Hmm.
feelings, our own feelings, and then our needs, our desires, and our requests. Unfortunately, the vast majority of us are quite illiterate in expressing our needs and desires because we've been taught that desire is wrong. Instead, we've been trained to criticize, insult, and otherwise communicate in ways that create distance. So we can simplify this and say needs can be thought of as resources that life requires in order to sustain itself. So according to this definition, we all have the same needs. What
Hmm.
differs from person to person is the strategy for fulfilling those needs. And it's then important to keep the needs separate from the strategy. What then is desire? Well, a Frenchman named Rene Girard said that all desire is a desire for being. The truth is that desire will never leave us alone. It's, it comes from Holy Mother herself. It flows from her constantly. It continually pushes us to find and make use of our creativity, propelling us toward an elusive but compelling goal. However, we've been taught, domesticated, to repress or demonize our desire. But it's there. So we typically indulge in it mindlessly or guiltfully. So when the Buddhist culture started springing up here in the West, a lot of us put aside the conventional rush toward comfort and security and opened up time and space for spiritual contemplation. The result was that this degenerated in people into being unable to decide where to go or what to do. Because for want of desire, life's vitality begins to evaporate. Desire is our vitality, which gives us our individuality and at the same time keeps crowding us out of ourselves. The sexual, the interpersonal, and the spiritual exist on one continuum and are part and parcel of each other. And the more we try to suppress desire, the more it stays us. Takes away the natural and it comes back at it out. So we must learn how to use our desires, listen to our desires, and instead of being used by our desire. And desire, as the Buddha found out, pushes us to recognize how much we need each other to make freedom possible. As we open to desire, things do not become less sexual, they actually become more erotic. Because desire seeks wholeness and bliss, and that is eros. So number 7 of things all relationships have in common is a willingness to accept responsibility for our own emotions. Self-awareness is important, so self-compassion. And there's a kind of calm that comes from believing you can handle a situation even when you haven't faced before. I can vouch for that. That calm increases our competence, and this competence is called self-efficacy. Trying new things, knowing you'll figure out a way to manage whatever emotion comes up, even if you don't know how yet. That's self-efficacy. Knowing that you'll get through it and be okay. That's self-efficacy. Number 8, compassion and empathy. Compassion is, again, something not something we are, it's not something we feel, it's something we practice. Compassion is putting ourselves in another's shoes, sitting with a person in whatever they are feeling, bearing witness to their pain while still loving who they are. And sometimes that person is ourselves, so we have to have compassion for ourselves, have to practice compassion with ourselves. Compassion is not politeness. It's not kindness. It's not doing good deeds for somebody while quietly judging them. Compassion engages our whole person, and it requires vulnerability, which makes it challenging. We have to allow ourselves to be present as equal to another person, recognizing the light in them and in darkness. That forces us to embrace the same thing in ourselves, accepting them for who they are. Compassion requires a willingness to hold other people accountable for the things they do, and again, accepting them for who they are. So the cornerstone of compassion is simple and emotionally very difficult to achieve. Because it means, first and foremost, always assuming the positive intent from others, looking for the most charitable interpretation of their deepest motives. And most of all, compassion for ourselves as we learn how to treat not just one partner well, but an entire network of people whose well-being depends on what we do.
Wow.
And number 9, no se te ipsum, know yourself. Learning to understand and express our needs, learning to take responsibility for our emotions. This is challenging work. We can't have what we want and need if we don't know what we need and desire. And this is a language, again, that very few of us have. So relationship skills are emergent phenomenon, and they come from developing ways of thinking about relationships and about ourselves. Developing the habit of behaving with integrity makes life simpler and smoother. And that is, integrity is a willingness to question yourself, challenge yourself, and explore without fear the hidden parts of ourselves. We have been programmed, domesticated to positively worship self-denial, while at the same time justifying why we have to purchase so much stuff to fulfill us. Mm-hmm. And those who unapologetically satisfy their desires are vilified as immature, disgusting, and sinful. So it's time to change this. It's time to stop worshiping self-denial. And I have a perfect example of this. An acquaintance of mine who I met at a spiritual retreat back in 2018. He actually converted to Catholicism, one of the most straitjacket religions ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she just posted on Facebook yesterday. I saw it was day 7 of her 7-day trek without water, not even allowing water to touch her skin. Nothing. No water. Nothing for 7 days.
Trek.
And, and she's like, well, I did this because this is what our astronauts have to go through to train to go to space. And I'm like, well, are you going to space? What the hell? I mean, that to me is like Martin Luther walking around his cell using a rope with knots in it to beat himself for being sinful. It's the same thing, just self denial.
Yeah.
And then proclaiming, look, I did it. I
Mm.
denied myself access to water for a whole week.
Mm. Yeah.
Or something else. So let's finish with some myths that need to be busted. Long-term monogamous relationships are the only real relationships. What's the
Mm.
truth? There is nothing that can be achieved within a long-term relationship that cannot be achieved without one.
Mm-hmm.
A subset of this myth is the belief that if you're really in love, you will automatically lose interest in all others. What's the truth? A ring around your finger does not cause a nerve block to your genitals
Yeah.
or your desires.
Mm.
Number 2, sexual desire is a destructive force. This myth goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden and has
Mm.
led to a lot of crazy making double standards.
Mm-hmm.
So many of us believe that unashamed sexual desire, particularly for many people, destroys the family. Yet more families have been destroyed by bitter divorce over adultery than have ever been disturbed by ethical, consensual non-monogamy.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, loving someone makes it okay to control their behavior. This is part of the my wife, my husband, my boyfriend, my girlfriend possessive label.
Mm-hmm.
This myth also leads to the belief that having sex with someone else is something you do to your partner, not for yourself. And so having sex with someone else is the worst thing you can do to someone.
Mm.
This silly nonsense has brought about laws in many states for such a long time that adultery was the only reason for divorce.
Mm-hmm.
This myth is part of starvation economics that causes people to become possessive about people, things, and ideas that matter to them.
Mm-hmm.
And we could go into this starvation economics. So, yes, this is the opposite of the abundance we were talking about. 7 million possibilities for a relationship. No, we're in starvation economics. Starvation economics, right? We become possessive about the ideas. Where the hell did this whole bullshit nonsense about intellectual property come from?
Mm-hmm.
Starvation economics.
Mm. That's a good word, a good term.
Yeah. So, truth. The truth, you are already whole. And when you have a satisfying relationship with yourself, then you have something of great worth to share with many others. Your human capacity for sex, pleasure, love, and intimacy is far greater than you think. So, what matters to us at Aloha Ainidao Living Communalism Ranching is that not that you agree with us, but that you start questioning the prevailing paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
Not just question it, move to, you know, decide what kind of sexual life you want to have, and to dissolve the old paradigm so you can truly have that what you desire.
Mm-hmm. That you face the uncomfort of expanding,
Yes, the discomfort of expanding. Yeah.
discomfort of of finding what you really want.
Yeah. So
Everybody thinks that they want this. They all have this princess in the castle story,
yeah,
monogamous,
the fairy tale. Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
think that's their story, and then life brings them all these situations where they see that that's not what they really want, but then they
Right.
keep thinking they want that, and they don't find it. So they find, even if they find it, they find that perfect man and that perfect situation, they're incomplete.
because they haven't taken time to be complete in themselves,
Hmm.
right? So yeah, and that's what the aloha idealism is so important for, is discovering our own divinity, so we can, those are the those are the methods we use to discover our own divinity inside ourselves, our own connection to Holy Mother, so that we know we're complete in ourselves,
Hmm.
whole and complete and perfect. And then, right, we can go on to become self-regulating, communalism, ranching, and we don't need a centralized government to regulate everything for us.
Yeah. Well, so today I was on the meditation on the about this conversation, and of course, a lot of the words that stick to me and that are going around my head come from you. So I was thinking about this, and I was doing some exercises, and I discovered that I'm constantly marrying two different things, like you, like what Aloha Nidau Living is, right? Bringing this and that, this thing and this other thing, and where when you do that, you discover that there's that needed to be done. That like the world needed that love affair, that the son
Yeah,
of that, the product of those of the combination of those two things that were apparently not matched for each other, right? Because oh, this is black and this is white, you know, you
yeah,
can't marry them, or this is male and this is male, you can't marry that,
yeah,
or whatever. Use this a metaphor. Um,
right.
so so this fragmentation that we live in, and we practice all these purist disciplines and practices.
Monogamous discipline.
Exactly. and 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 then we're not marrying anything.
No,
So
we're not.
so we live in this system, in this relationship mindset where we feel free because we're not ever really creating something. We're
Right,
not ever really going into something new. We're not never really marrying, exploring uh,
right.
things, bringing them together, and creating a new. So this came to my mind while I was marrying two movement disciplines. I was doing like I want to do yoga, but I also do capoeira, and I'm like, well, these things can marry,
Yeah, they can.
and wow, look at this! I discovered a whole path, a whole world of practices that could not be discovered if I didn't marry those two things.
Yeah,
And so that's what when this polyamory conversation became really relevant to me because and this word marrying, right? So it turns out that we can be very monogamous, we can be married, and yet we don't marry, we don't really go deeper, we don't really combine two souls, we don't we and so I want to say this because a lot of people or some people might hear the word or read the word polyamory, and I know that some young people are wanting to practice that, but they fall into this thing where which is a very I don't want to put it as a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing, but it's a superficial thing where you're just trying to have different relationships,
right.
but you're going deep with any single one of them, and
Exactly. Not being intimate with any single one of them, right? Just
you're not
having multiple fuck buddies. That's what
Exactly.
most people interpret polyamory as.
Exactly. And so I wanted to highlight that, and also highlight that the system we live in does not allow for creating anything new. So you can't if you're just living with a job for a job, following the rules, following the laws,
Or you
complying with
take
the
that,
laws,
yeah,
complying with everything, and then you want to be, oh, but I want to be polyamorous, I want to be free, right? You're going to fall into this fuck buddy thing, because if you were to go into a real relationship with someone, you would have to question, like, your life. You would have to make congruence with what you're discovering in that love relationship. I mean, you would have to be opening up your real feelings, your real insights, wanting to have somebody really get to know you, really
right,
get to inside of you, and really marrying you in the sense of allowing yourself to have that person come into you, change you, give you what you lack, and that means of course being open to change, right?
yeah.
And but that doesn't happen in some of these of this inside of this idea of polyamorous relationships.
It
Oh no,
doesn't. Well, there's three levels of bonding or of intimacy, so to speak, and one is kind of the primal, which is in our first and second chakras, which is the physicality of sex, right? Purely,
hmm
and that's what junk sex is. That's all we know. We never
hmm
allow that sexual energy to rise and open our hearts and have this heart bonding, heart to heart bonding. And you can bond heart to heart with many people and
hmm
still have plenty of love for all of them. And
hmm
then the third one is as it comes up higher, then there's a soul to soul level bonding, but we're all, the vast majority of us are all at this primal level, which is the pure physicality of it.
hmm So then this marrying and this becoming really intimate and becoming really in love with life, with someone, with yourself, it does not work if you are just trying to have that and not be congruent with everything else.
Yeah, yeah,
If you're trying to fit this into the modern way of living, it doesn't fit. You can't.
yeah,
You're gonna find it's not gonna work. So you have to go the whole way. You have to do the whole thing. You have to do the whole work. So there's 141 conversations about all the other things that we need to pay attention to in order to come to the joy of polyamory.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So that's what I wanted to say, and share how this word marrying, but because that's the beautiful thing. Now I discovered that in 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 this path we can really marry, and you can make contracts and
Yeah.
ceremonies
And
and
we
all
can
that,
marry more than two, right?
and and,
We
and
can
you can
marry
think
more than two. Like
you're really
I've married
married.
three.
Yeah, you can think you're really married, and well, I'm married and I live, and you can live 20 years with someone, and what came out of that? Did
Yeah,
we go somewhere? But
yeah,
here, with a path like adult, we are going somewhere. We're creating something, like really creating something, really getting somewhere, really
but
walking somewhere, and of course, that opens up to the real experience of love. So that's all I want to.
yeah.
So where does that take us for next week?
Next week we're going to totally shift directions. We're going to totally leave the sexual scene, and we're going to go. Well, not really, because how have we, with the compulsive moralism? How have we been browbeat into monogamy
Hmm
with the myth of sexually transmitted disease? So we're not really leaving this because we're going back to the germ theory next week to dig into it deeper.
Okay. Yeah, and that's very important because that's one of the first argument. Anybody arguing with you about this that doesn't know, that's not challenging that specific
Yeah.
point, is going to bring it about as an argument.
Yep.
Oh, STDs. That's going to be
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
heavy argument, and so we have to this how do you say it? Disprove that.
Yeah. We'll have to punch
Bust.
holes in this sacred
Yeah.
cow belief of STDs.
STDs and germ theory. So the title, STDs and germ theory. How about
Oh,
that?
just
Because we
germ.
did we
Yeah.
had one for germ theory, just plain.
Yeah.
Or should we think about it?
Yeah. Make it STDs and germ theory. I mean.
Or germ theory part 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's what it is. We're going deeper, but we'll show how quickly, for instance, that when you take a pill, your body is set up that there's many stations along the way that can remove toxins. When you get an injection, when you get under the skin, those barriers are never there.
Mm.
So the toxins fully enter you. And that's just a tidbit. And then another is that germs don't cause, which we already discussed, but we'll go deeper into this, how Anton Pierre Béchamp actually proved this. Germs don't cause disease, they just congregate where decaying tissue is to help get rid of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Alrighty. So that's next week's conversation. And
so if you break out in something that would get diagnosed as herpes after having sex, it's not something you got from that person. It's something in you that's decaying that needs to be gotten rid of.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll be learning about that then next week. And this would be the end of this live stream.
Yep.
Thank you everyone for being here. Waterfalls of blessings, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Wow.